Hello, this is Anna Laura Brown, host of the Autoimmune Rehab Podcast, where we talk about how to actually thrive and heal your autoimmune condition rather than just covering it up with pills or changing your diet and hoping you'll feel better one day. We feature solo episodes on helpful topics and interviews with guests who have actually walked in your shoes with autoimmune disorders and or who have years of experience in helping people to thrive and not just survive with autoimmune challenges. I'm a health coach who started this podcast because I was diagnosed with Hashimoto's in 2018, and I wanted to inspire hope and transform health for people with autoimmune challenges. So keep listening, and let's get you the help and hope you really need. This is the Autoimmune Rehab Podcast. And ladies, today I am happy to welcome Julia Lupine to the Autoimmune Rehab Podcast, and we're going to be talking about something that kind of surprises me I haven't addressed yet, but I really have it, is the whole thing about EMFs and wireless cell phone towers and the impact that those can have on our health. And so, welcome to the podcast, Julia. Why don't you start off a little bit here and introduce yourself to us?
Hi, well, my name's Julia Lupine, and thanks again for having me on. I developed a sensitivity to artificial electrical fields. It's known as electrosensitivity, or EHS. I've been living with this condition for the past, well, probably for large part of my life, but I've been knowingly aware of it since about 2001 or so, when I started getting this burning feeling around this part of my head where you hold a cell phone, and it just got too severe to ignore. And then I eventually just stopped taking calls and stopped using it. And eventually it gave me one too many headaches, and I hit it with a big rock and killed it, and have never gone back since. And anyway, I've gone through this whole health journey since then and have learned a lot, and it's been really informative. And I have this information that I want to share with the world, and especially with sufferers of autoimmune conditions, because before realizing I was electrosensitive, I went through years and years of mysterious, weird symptoms and chasing diagnoses, trying to figure out what was going on. And I never got a definitive answer either from the medical system or alternative practitioners. And now, after I figured it out and was able to get to a remote area, this is a landline I'm using right now. There's no power turned on in the house other than the power that goes to this computer. There's not even a fridge running or lights, because I'm sensitive to household power too. But yeah, after I figure it, but not everyone is this bad. There's varying degrees of it. Anyway, long story short, after figuring these things out and learning how to change my lifestyle, I'm pretty much 100% symptom free. I'm in great health. And this was after, years of, I almost died from related conditions and just years of bad health. And now I'm, symptom free and working on a farm all day and doing great. So I just want to share this message in as many places as I possibly can and get the word out, in case, even if I can only help one person, it'll all be worth it.
Yeah, absolutely, Julia. That's quite the story. And like you said, I think a lot of people are sensitive to it and just don't realize it, especially anybody that has an autoimmune condition. Like I've personally started putting EMF blockers on my phone and computer and a lot of those things, and I've definitely noticed a difference right away. But, not all of us are quite as sensitive, but still, I think some sort of sensitivity is in a lot of people, and I think a lot of people just don't realize it. So what was that first clue, if you will, or that first trigger that had you thinking, I wonder if this is something related to wireless or cell phones that's causing me a problem?
Well, I had a unique situation because I was already living in caves before this started. And see, I moved to the Moab, Utah area in 2011. And just for fun, I started deciding to practice wilderness survival skills and live off grid. And, I had trouble holding jobs. So it was just an easy way to actually, save money on rent. And I still worked. So I'd come into town every week or so and do some work for landscaping and gardening or painting work for a day or two if I wanted to make some money, and then go back to the wilderness for a few days. So I had a unique opportunity to see the contrast to viscerally experience the contrast between a zero EMF artificial and EMF environment, or as close to it as possible on Earth right now, a very low EMF environment versus a saturated field environment in like in town near. And of course, the first thing I would normally do when I got to town would be get on my cell phone and call up my friends and make plans, or call my work contacts to, figure out work or check my messages. So I'd spent, a few days of just feeling blissfully good and symptom free out in the wilds. And then immediately I'd turn when I had the cell phone on, I'd immediately get this headache in the part of my head right where the cell phone was. And this happened many times, and it became too obvious to ignore. I didn't want to believe it. I thought it was some tinfoil hat stuff and like kind of crazy. So over the years, this got stronger and my condition got stronger and stronger. I'd feel other people's cell phones, or I'd feel Wi-Fi or power lines, but I didn't know anything. I just equated it to new age woo-woo energy stuff, whatever. I never met anyone with electrosensitivity, and my friends all thought I was crazy. But it became, and then I would try to go online at the library to research it, but I'd start getting the headache within a couple minutes and just have to run out of the library. So I was really in the dark ages. And I started to piece things together just from, I'd find free biology books or whatever, just anything I could get my hands on, and read about biology and, human physiology, and read about it in the desert and try to figure it out. But then I was lucky enough to meet a top researcher, probably one of the top researchers in the field of electrosensitivity, lived in the same area of the country as me, because it happened to be a really low EMF area, except for the towns. But he didn't live in the towns. He had a remote area that he lived in. Gary Duncan is his name, and he gave me some he's a writer, and gave me some pamphlets and literature about electrosensitivity. And that made me realize that, hey, I wasn't crazy, and that in fact, electrosensitive people are often the best and brightest that it happens to. And he told me some just different, basically said avoidance, but also some grounding and shielding techniques that would help me, which actually it did not include those metal beanies that you see ads for. It wasn't like that at all. It was low cost things. He said, use natural fiber clothing such as wool and cotton, linen, leather. Just like layers of natural material is best. I never go to town without my leather coat now. And I have this cool leather helmet too. It's like, I wish I brought it with me to show you, but it kind of looks like an aviator style helmet with the ear flaps. And I get compliments on it all the time. I don't always tell them what it's for, but much better than a tinfoil hat, which I did try making once, and it didn't work. Back in
That's funny.
because I just figured that was what crazy people did. But anyway, it's been a journey. So I've been electrosensitive that I've known of for the past over 10 years. But you see, before that, I had autoimmune issues, like I never got a Lyme disease diagnosis, but naturopaths on the East Coast told me that my symptoms matched up with Lyme. So I'd get joint swelling and extreme brain fog, chronic fatigue, horrible chemical smells bothered me that other people wouldn't notice, just disgusting body products that people spray on themselves. Headaches, sometimes migraines, and I just couldn't really figure out why I'd get symptoms. It was sometimes food related, like sugar bothered me, but I also was addicted to it, and I did all these dietary things to try to help myself, but there was always something missing, or something I couldn't figure out or pinpoint. And I never got 100% better until I figured out the electric component. And then that's what made everything clear. And I really think that it probably is not the only cause of autoimmune disease. It's a multifaceted problem, but I think it may be a major key component that's being drastically overlooked by the community. And
Oh, yeah, absolutely. I believe so. And I believe too many people just focus too much on diet and they don't look at all the other things. And yeah, I think you're absolutely right. And the other thing, too, that I have noticed from talking to several other people and from some of the research I've done is that Lyme can trigger autoimmune disorders in people as well. And that's, something that a lot of people overlook as well, is the role that that co-infection with the Lyme can have in triggering autoimmunity, too. So, yeah, it's a good point. So I have a couple of other questions to ask you based on things you've already brought up. So the first thing is, you mentioned in the beginning that you don't even have a running refrigerator in your house. So how do you deal with like keeping food cold then?
well, this time of year, it's really easy because I live in Western Colorado and I just put stuff outside. In the summertime, it can be problematic. See, I lived for years without a fridge and just got used to it. I plan my diet around it. I'll buy a bunch of sweet potatoes and vegetables that don't really need it, and fruits and things like that. And like oatmeal, dry beans, and just cook, food stays out, doesn't need to be refrigerated right away. So I just cook enough for a day or two. And that worked out pretty much fine for me until I got milk goats. So now I have cheese to worry about and keeping that cold. So I actually there's a couple of things I've done. There's this it's called a Zier pot. They use them in third world countries sometimes. So you take 2 terracotta pots, like the biggest pots you can find, like from Home Depot, and you get one bigger than the other, and you put the smaller pot inside the bigger pot and put wet sand in between the two. And then you cover it over with a lid and cover that with wet rags. You put this in the sun and continually add water, keep the sand moist and keep the rags on top moist. And that will actually work by evaporative cooling and keep a bottle of milk room temp or as cold as a refrigerator will.
Oh, well, that's interesting. That's super cool. Okay, well, we'll have to link maybe some more information about how to create one of those in our show notes so people can access that kind of thing. Then the other question I had is, let's say somebody is starting to become aware that they have this electrosensitivity issue, but let's say maybe they don't live in the farm, maybe they have a normal job like an office job or they're a teacher or corporate employee, something like that, where it really isn't practical or possible for them to completely eliminate their cell phone usage or to get rid of some of that modern day technology. What would be some of your recommendations for things like blocking EMFs or trying to see what they can do to reduce their exposure?
Well, it's a tough one, but there is a lot that you can do. You have control over your own home, or at least we should. So at least step one, at least turn the wireless off at night. And sometimes people do that and they find their sleep gets a lot better. But then the next step would be get rid of the wireless altogether if you can. Landlines still exist and you can get a landline put in, but phone companies are phasing them out because there's no demand. And what we need to do is reinstate the demand for landlines and get rid of the demand for cell phones, and then or at least get landline phone and internet, because that doesn't bother people and you're not radiating your whole neighborhood and killing the bees and getting headaches from that. So that would be something that people can do. Especially the most important thing is to sleep in a low EMF area. So sometimes people turn off the breaker, houses have a breaker board with different switches that go to different areas of the house. So some people turn off the power to their room. And I did that for a year when I lived in a house with power, and I was able to get through a winter that way. And because sleep is the most important. And then, yeah, as far as reduce in the workplace, it's difficult because it's not really something you can usually tell your boss without them thinking that you're crazy. So I'd probably try to find a new job personally, but that's often not practical. So I'd say just work on the things that you can control and spend a lot of time in nature and try to sleep in a low EMF area as much as possible. And then
Yeah,
maybe start, oh yeah, and I was going to say, and then get some cool leather clothing too, because it
oh,
might
that's
help.
a good tip. Yeah, and then I think the other thing too you could probably try is that there are grounding mats that you can also put on or around your desk and the electromagnetics and things like that to try to see if you
Well,
can control that a little bit too.
those can be problematic because anything that you're plugging into an outlet, you're, it's it's basically connecting to the electrical grid of the house and could actually make things worse. So
Yeah.
yeah, there's so there's a low cost grounding technology that I learned from Gary though. There's a
Uh-huh.
couple different things that you can do. Costs almost nothing. One would be to just get a tub full of sand and put your feet in that. And because sand and rocks, like stuff like that it's grounding. It actually gives gives you negative electrons, like putting your bare feet on the ground, which by the way, I do every day. I'm a barefoot hiker, been doing it for years, and it really helps. But for people whose feet aren't toughened up like that or live in a city, just standing on the ground is helpful, or laying on the beach is like the best thing you can do.
That's
Um,
awesome. That's cool. So
yeah.
I'm curious about your thoughts about like EMF blocker wearables. So there's a lot of places you can get things like necklaces and bracelets and things that claim to be EMF blockers. Do you have any experience with those, or you found those to be helpful at all?
Not too much, but from what I've heard from extreme electrosensitives who can feel things, we'd be the person to test it on. And for the most part, it doesn't work, honestly. Like everyone wants to make a buck, and there's always going to be a snake oil salesman, to be
For sure,
honest.
yeah. And I've been a little skeptical of it, which is the reason I bring that up too, because I know I'm sure people that are listening to this, some people probably have experience with either
And
trying
don't,
them out or seeing them being sold.
yeah.
I wasn't sure what you thought of that.
I mean, some of them have almost convinced me because they sound so good, but then I read the reviews of people who are actually extreme sensitive, and yeah, they don't work. But what I would do is, instead of, when you have that urge to spend your money, instead of spending it on that, buy a bag of lion's mane powder or a bottle of the tincture, because that helps regenerate brain cells, or buy some magnesium, because that really helps with electrosensitivity symptoms.
Oh, that's interesting too, because I think a lot of people are magnesium deficient these days too. So that's a good, interesting point to point out too as well. So I know you've written a few books on the topic as well. So where can people find your books if they want to check those out and see what you have to share in those books?
Well, this is the main one, Under a Rock, an electrosensitive survival guide by Julia Lupine. And yeah, you can find it on Amazon, and leaving reviews really, really helps. And yeah, definitely check that out.
Cool. So we'll have that linked in the show notes then, so anybody that wants it can go there and find it. And any place else that people should connect with you. Is it best if they want to reach out to you via email, or how would they do that?
Well, I actually just started a Facebook page, because ironically, a lot of us are connecting with each other on Facebook, which I think is great. I never had Facebook when it started, or any social media at all. I mean, I was living in a cave, but I finally decided to go for it and click join. And I've met a lot of great people through it. There's electrosensitivity support groups. But anyway, yeah, just search Julia Lupine on Facebook, and I'll, and reach out to me that way. There's
Cool.
some cool pictures.
try
Oh
to
yeah, I was
link
going to
to
say,
the Facebook group in the description as well too, so people can find it there too.
okay.
Great. So anything else that you wanted to share with us today that we haven't covered?
I think we got most of it. Just yeah, so to find another thing I'd recommend to people to find out if they're electrosensitive is to get a meter. The meters are, there's different kinds. The Cornet meter is pretty good, or the Safe and Sound is a really good entry level beginner's meter. And that way you can test where the fields are and just try to avoid the red, just stay in the green as much as possible. And you can really avoid exposure a lot that way and help pinpoint what the um, sources in your house might be that you can help mitigate. But also with the meter, if you take it out and try to find a field-free area to camp and spend a couple nights there if you can, without your cell phone, of course, and then see how you feel when you come back and go back and forth a few times, and you can just really see if it's something that might make a difference for you.
That's awesome. That's great. I love that. Well, thanks so much, Julia, for sharing all those tips. If you have enjoyed this episode, please go ahead and rate it or write us a review and check out the Julia's book and the Facebook group for more information. And stay tuned, follow and subscribe to this podcast as well for more episodes coming at you every Friday.